tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namassami. Good evening, everybody. Nice to be back. It's been about 30 months, I think, since I passed through Wat Palelai. I thought I might get back a bit sooner, but that's what happens, isn't it? Other things happen. Did anybody notice just now in the guided meditation that it was easier to be with the feeling of the breath after doing a period of metta? Did anybody notice that? As I was hoping to demonstrate that. I was thinking, often I lead a guided meditation first and I try to get a bit of a feel for the room, and I wonder, what should I talk about? And nothing came to mind. And then I had a sense. I asked again 5 minutes later, what should I talk about? And still nothing came to mind. And then 5 more minutes, I thought, okay, I think what these people, this is my intuition, I might be wrong. But my intuition was telling me is that what these people need more than anything is to sit quietly and meditate with monks. And have some metta in their citta. So I went with that. And because you have a lot of thoughts in your life, a lot of concepts, a lot of sophisticated information, a lot of stuff in your minds, as we all do. When we work with the breath, anapanasati, that wonderful Lord Buddha described anapanasati as the crown jewel of all of the meditations. He said it's suitable for everybody, and it can even lead one to liberation. Such a wonderful and powerful practice. This quality of mindfulness, everybody has some, but it tends to be dissipated, cloudy, not very good mindfulness, because it's scattered by thinking about the past, thinking about the future, thinking about other people, making plans, reacting with liking and not liking. So all of that mental activity scatters presence of mind. But the breath, of course, is in the very middle of the body-mind experience. And as you pay attention to it, as it changes moment by moment, you become more and more in the present moment. And the energy which has been dissipating is able to collect and settle. And then all sorts of wonderful things happen just through gently restraining the mind. It's very common for people to experience then more of a sense of clarity. The dust settles. When we can be more consistently with the breath for longer periods of time, it's not uncommon for people to experience tranquility, serenity. If people are quite sincere in their breath meditation contemplation, simply being aware of the breath, not sending the mind out, not picking up hindrances, feelings of rapture can arise. Some people might feel joy, great happiness, to the extent that tears roll down one's cheeks. Other people can feel like they're floating in the sky. Other people might feel solid, heavy like a mountain, but it's a pleasant feeling, a feeling of stability. simply by being consistently with the breath. These are qualities of piti, they say in Pali, rapture, pasati, tranquility. Often in Thai they talk about piti sukha, pleasure, mental pleasure. When we add the practice of metta, this is Lord Buddha describes as a divine abiding, a pleasant abiding here and now. So I think for modern people, when we come to sit at the end of the day, quite normal for there to be a lot of thinking about all sorts of things. We're somewhat bombarded with information and news and opinions, and the devices have exacerbated that, the phones and the tablets and the social media. So I think as a general principle, I would recommend that people start their evening practice with some metta, 5 to 10 minutes of metta, because it's taking thought and using it in a skillful way, and it's putting something wholesome in the mind, and that naturally then replaces whatever else was there, which might have been wholesome or neutral or unwholesome. But the thing about metta is that it's always wholesome. It's intrinsically altruistic emotion. So when we combine these practices, the breath meditation practice imbued with metta, this is very helpful for establishing a sense of well-being, a sense of clarity, a bit of a center. And in times when the news is kind of scary in many respects, it's normal for there to be some kind of background anxiety. And I think one of the ways this affects us, because, generations ago, many of you had ancestors in China, and the villagers in one valley, the merchant, the pot maker in one valley, or the furniture maker in another valley might not hear about what happened in another valley until after winter, 6 months of snow. And the human organism kind of evolved to process a certain amount of information at a certain pace. And I don't think it was kind of meant for hearing about every disaster around the world as it occurs. It does make people kind of high-strung and anxious. And we might get so used to that we don't even notice. And so when we place this quality, this divine abiding in the heart, and afterwards you just feel a sense of well-being, it's like, oh, isn't that nice? And it's actually quite important to experience well-being. And if we want to develop samadhi, collectedness, stillness, the Lord Buddha explains in the 11 Benefits of Loving Kindness Sutta that for those who cultivate loving kindness, the mind becomes peaceful easily. So many people might wonder, why does my mind not become peaceful? And Lord Buddha has given you a very good hint here. If you cultivate metta, it will increase the chances. But there are all sorts of benefits for your health as well, like being anxious, being stressed, makes your body produce chemicals and hormones that aren't good for your health, can affect your sleep. Meditation, on the other hand, produces immune system supporting hormones and helps you sleep more deeply. Another of the benefits of cultivating metta is that one has no bad dreams. When I was living with Ajahn Achalo in my second pansa, I guess I'll explain how I met Ajahn Achalo. I went to where to start? So I started at Wat Nanachat at Unuban Ratchathani, the monastery established by Lumpur Samedo at Ajahn Chah's request. Ajahn Samedo went there. The Western monks, the foreign monks lived there. And Lumpur Pasano took over from Ajahn Sameto at one point. After Lumpur Sameto went to England, Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Jayasaro would take turns being the abbot for periods of time, giving each other retreat opportunities. So when I first turned up to Wat Nanachat, at the age of 22, Ajahn Jayasaro was the abbot. At that time, Ajahn Jayasaro was 37 years old. So you think of Lumpur Jayasaro in his mid-60s. I saw a baby-faced Ajahn Jayasaro with movie star qualities, chiseled jaw, sparkly blue eyes. When I turned up at Wat Nanachat, it was the Uposatha day. I stepped out of the tuk-tuk with my backpack, and I heard this strange noise resounding in the forest. Yo so. What's that? It was the one pra, it was the Uposatha day. The chanting had just begun. I walked up towards the sala, I put my backpack outside the sala, I looked inside and I walked inside and I bowed and I sat and I was looking around, and a monk came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're sitting in the women's section. Please go and sit over there." I hadn't noticed that there were sections, but I had a look around. I went and sat in the men's section and I looked at these monks on the asana, long row of skinny white monks. They looked impressively depressed and serious, and all of their knees were on the even with the ground. I thought they were in full lotus. I didn't know yet about this sideways. And a Thai man recited something. The senior monk got up on the asana, and that was Ajahn Jayasaro. And he gave the precepts, and he gave a Dhamma talk in perfect, fluent Thai. And I was like, wow, it's amazing. And so that's how it began. I became an Agarika, 8 preceptor, and then a novice, and then a bhikkhu. Normally the situation there is to be an Anagarika for 3 to 6 months, a novice for at least a year. And that period of time is when one considers, can I do this? Am I really committed? And also the community was deciding, do we want to take him on? So I did become a bhikkhu, and I benefited a great deal from Ajahn Jayasaro's. Ajahn Jayasaro had tremendous faith in Lumpur Cha. I didn't meet Lumpur Cha, but Ajahn Jayasaro at that time was beginning to write his biography on Ajahn Chah, and he would read it at tea time to the monks. And so through that, I felt some closeness. It had only been a few years since Lumpur Cha had passed away, and through hearing Ajahn Jayasaro describe his love and respect, and apparently when Ajahn Jayasaro met Ajahn Chah, he'd paid respects to the Buddha, and then he paid respects to Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah commented, "You bowed very beautifully." And then he commented also, "If you knew what the Buddha had endured, how much he had put up with to realize what he realized, you would cry every time you bowed." It's just an interesting kind of a teaching we don't often hear from the forest tradition, that a quality of love and gratitude, awe. So that was the first statement that Ajahn Chah made to Ajahn Jayasaro. Ajahn Jayasaro, I believe, had been to see Ajahn Mahabua, and it was very impressive. But when he told us that when he came to Wat Pong, he paid respects to Lumpur Cha, he just felt it was home. It felt like home. Lumpur seemed naturally to be a spiritual father. Ajahn Jayasaro would give Dhamma talks on the Uposatha days, the one pras, and he would explain, I had a lot of doubts as a 22, 23-year-old Australian, and he would, and I was like, I remember juggling, do I really want to do this? Can I do this? my Ajahn Achalo said in one of his Dhamma talks, these rules, first of all he said, the Buddha had the most merit of any being in the universe, the most merit of any human being. He could have done anything, and he chose to be a monk. And this form that you're living within, the 227 rules, this came from the mind of a pure, enlightened, liberated Buddha. And so when I was having doubts, can I do this, should I do this? How do you argue with that? It's like the Buddha established this form, the Buddha himself was a bhikkhu. I had this sense of, oh, I have to do this. It wasn't completely happy. It wasn't a completely happy realization, because it did mean 3 a.m. wake up and 5 kilometers of walking on sharp stones on an empty stomach, and no mattress, and living with grumpy, fault-finding Western monks, who I love. I learned to love them. I didn't love them in the beginning. Ajahn Achalo, he also had faith in Ajahn Chah's core Wat, the way Ajahn Chah laid down the monastic etiquette, which was based on the Vinaya. In the monks' rules, there is the Acharya Wat, the Sakya Wat. A lot of it had to do with taking care of the requisites, taking care of the robes, taking care of the monastery. So there was a beautiful sense of being connected to an ancient tradition that was still functioning, and many small things. It's not a rule, but Ajahn Achalo would explain to us the way we carry a monk's bag, the way we place it down quietly, the way we walk softly, not to talk when walking past another monk's kuti just in case they were meditating. Various things about consideration, etiquette, gracefulness, graciousness. And so I benefited a great deal. But I was still rich with suffering, I would say. And I remember many years later I met Lumpur Pat, and Lumpur Pat, without me saying anything said, "This one will never disrobe. He's rich with suffering." But I digress. Yes, what does that mean? I think if a person actually has practiced in their past lives, their awareness of the dukkha, First Noble Truth, might be a bit more acute than in most people. So you notice dukkha faster, and you feel it more acutely, and then you feel you have no choice. You have to do something about your dukkha. You have to cultivate the path that leads beyond it. But not everybody has that. A lot of people dive into whatever's available in terms of sensuality and commit to materialism and hope for the best, get a bit bored at 35, 40, 50. Some people get a bit bored at 70, but I was kind of bored at 15 and didn't find monasticism and didn't find the Bhikkhu Sangha until I was 22. But I also had that feeling of coming into Wat Nanachat. I felt like a boat that came into harbour, and it was cool and less wild. But as I mentioned, I still had a lot of dukkha, and so I had this thought that I'm going to need more help. As sophisticated and wise as Ajahn Achalo's, and helpful as Ajahn Achalo's teachings are, and as supportive as the community is, I'm going to need more help than this if I'm going to make it. So a monk had told me that if you go to the Emerald Buddha and make an aspiration, the devas that support Buddhism might answer your prayer. So I was on my way to a jungle area on the border of Burma, Samnak Song Dao Dam, where Ajahn Siripanyo resides. And I went with my friend Ajahn Sudanto, and we paid respects to the Emerald Buddha, and I made my aspiration. I said, I don't know why, but I was just talking to him as if he was the Buddha, which is kind of ridiculous, right? It's like, it doesn't make sense rationally. It's a stone statue. But somehow, I don't know, I was able to do it. Lord Buddha, I'm interested to be a monk for the remainder of my life, but I'm going to need more help than this. If there is a master in this country who I have a good karmic connection with, may I meet with him. So then I went to Daudam, a jungle area. I went in 1 month earlier than the group from Wat Palelai. In those days, a group from Wat Palelai would go in and spend usually March and April. I went in February. And it was during that time, Ajahn Achalo came into that jungle area with five other monks. And yeah, he was 44 at the time. So you all know Lumpur Anand with the socks and the fluffy hat and the golf buggy. But I met Lumpur Anand climbing the mountain, going off onto the bamboo bed under his mosquito net. And he said he would talk to his Thai monks first and practice with them for the first, I think, 3 nights, and then on the 4th and 5th night he would talk to the Westerners. I think there were 3 of us, as well as Ajahn Kalyano, 4 together, I think, plus Tanajan's 6. And so that's where I met Tanajan. And he answered a question that I had that was enormously helpful for my process. At the time, I was meditating, and this sense of dukkha would fill the heart. Everything's suffering would just fill the heart. And so I'd studied a little bit with Ajahn Sumedho, and Ajahn Sumedho had talked about just broadening awareness, making the mind like the sky, making it more spacious. And so I would try to do that. I'd make my mind more spacious, and then the dukkha would fill that space. And the extent to which I could make my mind more spacious, that was the extent to which I felt dukkha. And I thought, this isn't working. I thought that if I meditated more, kept all my precepts, and that my mind would become peaceful. So I had a big question to ask Ajahn Achalo, and part of it was I was thinking, God, I must have made so much bad karma. Maybe I don't have enough merit to be a monk. That was my doubt. So I wanted to ask him. So when I eventually had the chance to ask Tanajan, I said, well, what's happening with me? It's just dukkha. And he said, actually it's a correct perception. Everything is dukkha. Nothing's going wrong. I'm like, well, what do I do with it? He said, in the initial stages, some people's mind sensitivity develops before their equanimity. In fact, it's kind of necessary that your sensitivity develops before your equanimity. So the result of being ethical, the result of meditating, is that your mind begins to perceive things more truthfully. And the truth is, all sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe sankhara dukkha, conditions are unsatisfactory and impermanent. The perception of not self, sabbe sankhara anatta, that we have to work on that, we have to develop the insight. And in the initial stages we don't have that. So Ajahn Achalo said, it's as if you're in a burning house and you're burning with it. And it was true. That really was the case. And he said, the house is burning. All you can do now is patiently endure with this experience, and the mindfulness will get stronger as a result from that. And the day will come where you will be able to observe it without burning with it, but it takes time. And then he suggested that the metta practice would be a support in that process, that at least you could add kindness. And that was also not easy. That took quite some work, because I think a lot of modern people, we're brought up to be competitive, ambitious, and fault-finding, critiquing everything. You know, if you're going to go and eat a meal or go to a restaurant or whatever, you look at the reviews, don't you? What's everyone say about it? Oh, it's only 3.5 stars. Ugh. So we have that habit. We've trained ourselves to be critics about everything. And of course we apply this to ourselves. It's painful. We don't realize that at the time. When we critique everything outside, it comes back. Come to practice, and my practice isn't good enough. This place isn't good enough. This Ajahn isn't good enough. So, learning, Ajahn recommended that I spend 5 to 10 minutes of every single meditation session holding loving kindness in the heart area before turning to breath meditation. But just his advice or his acknowledgement that where you are there's nothing wrong with it. This is actually where you should be. A mind that becomes more sensitive to the truth of dukkha is a necessary step, because it's when we see the extent of dukkha is that then we get some real energy and some real resolve to do something about it, because it is possible to go beyond dukkha. That's the third noble truth. So then I asked him, Ajahn, do I have enough merit to be a monk? And he says, Achalo, you mi bun. You have merit, Achalo. I said, well, can I come and live with you? He said, Nimon, you can, I invite you. So that gave me some hope, some confidence. My teacher thinks, he became my teacher in that moment. Actually, not that moment. 2 days later, I decided he was my teacher. I was thinking, because, a different teacher might have given really different advice in that scenario. A different teacher might have said, yeah, it doesn't quite sound right. Maybe you're not cut out for this. Another teacher might say, maybe you need to see a psychiatrist. But Ajahn Achalo says, you're exactly where you need to be. That's exactly what you should be feeling. And you just need to patiently endure and keep putting forth effort. Another thing he said was, and I felt just the same. That's very nice. Ajahn Achalo had a great reputation already. So if Ajahn Achalo used to feel like this, I'll probably be okay, Very encouraging. But it was a couple of days later when I was thinking, well, his advice made sense and I like him, but I still don't know if he's my teacher. I feel like I need a sign. And that day, somebody offered a pizza. I think there were 9 or 10 monks altogether, 9 I think, and there were 8 pieces of pizza. And not surprisingly, the monk at the end of the line didn't get one. And then Ajahn Achalo gave the blessing, and after the blessing, he put his piece of pizza in his bowl lid, and he said, send that down to Ajahn Achalo. And I had Ajahn Achalo's bowl lid in my hand and his piece of pizza, and I thought, Ajahn Achalo's my teacher. It's a sign. So then I went to live with him, spent the rainy season retreat with him, and so of course I couldn't speak any Thai. And in those days there was one other Western monk, it was Ajahn Kalyano. Ajahn Kalyano at the time was studying for the Abhidhamma, and he doesn't mention this himself, I'll tell you. He actually came first in the country in Abhidhamma, taking the test in Thai. But needless to say, he didn't have that much time to chat with Ajahn Achalo. He was memorizing his Abhidhamma lists. And so it was kind of isolating and was good and bad. That's the thing. It's always, oftentimes the challenge is also the opportunity. Because there wasn't anyone to talk with, there was a lot of time to practice. And I did practice a lot. I think the next generation of monks at Wat Palelai don't quite have the same opportunity because there's so many English speakers. They have so many friends. And they don't get to be alone at their kuti and work with it as much. I'm sure they're sincere in their own way. It's just a different age. But sometimes I would go and sit among the other monks, the junior monks that were talking to Ajahn Achalo, and just sit there. I just needed to feel his metta. I didn't understand anything, but I would just sit there and close my eyes. And Ajahn Achalo in those days, when he spread metta, it was really, really strong. It was like you would smile involuntarily. Just this, sorry. And then it didn't matter that you didn't understand. And then I would go back and meditate. And similarly, I would sometimes massage Tanajan's back or feet after the evening chanting. And I think he was going into his metta jhana or his attainment, and then he would come out and you could see this sparkle in his eyes, and then he'd blast you with metta, and then he'd say, go back and meditate. I'd go and meditate again. So it was very helpful to have met a monk who had as much metta as Tanajan has. These days, apparently, he can't spread metta in the same way with the same 100% volume, velocity, because he had the insight that a certain amount of his own life force was going. The way he used to practice metta was he would just completely empty the battery, like blow dryer metta on high. And but he realized after some decades that a little bit of his own life force was going with that, and he had to adjust his metta to keep a certain amount inside. He still has a lot of metta, of course, but it wasn't quite the same kind of full blast. So I was very fortunate to live with him and experience that on many occasions. I remember once, told the story many times, sweeping leaves and being very grumpy because the way they sweep leaves is that you have to sweep every single leaf in those large flat spaces, and as soon as you finish, the breeze blows and new leaves fall down. And it is the case that if you were to sweep most of the leaves, but not all of them, it would take half the time. But because they're sweeping every single one, and the breeze would go, oh, what's the point? I'd be like, I just want to go back and meditate. One day I was really grumpy, stabbing away at the leaves. And then all of a sudden, anger was gone, the frustration was gone, the opinions were gone, and I smiled involuntarily, and everything was fine. And I saw Ajahn Achalo walking, and boom, 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 boom. So I asked him the next day, Tanajan, when I was sweeping leaves yesterday and I wasn't in a good mood, all of a sudden I was in a good mood, I'm happy, peaceful, and I saw you walking in the distance. Did you help me? He says, yeah, I did. And he made a body language. He did this. He said, I knocked your mind state out of your mind. I wanted you to see that it's possible to sweep leaves without being angry. And I wanted you to see the power of metta. And I said, Tanajan Kap, could you please do that every day? And he said, nope, just this once. You have to learn to do it yourself. But it was a wonderful teaching that obviously I'll never forget. So, wow, you really can replace a negative mindset with a positive one if you're skilled enough at it, and if that metta, wholesome, altruistic Brahma Vihara replaces negative mind states, and then you have a wholesome one, a pleasant abiding, a divine abiding, a Brahma Vihara. And then it's easy, more easy to be with the breath. So when I first began, many of you know, I like to do long meditation retreats in Bodh Gaya. And Bodh Gaya is the Mahabodhi temple, a noisy, crowded place. And when I first started, but when the mind gets peaceful there, at least in my experience, it gets more peaceful than other places. So that's my particular interest in meditating there, as well as my love, devotion, gratitude, respect to Buddhas, which I love to express. When the mind becomes peaceful there, it becomes more peaceful. I'm not sure if that's the case for everybody. That may just be part of my karmic tendency, karmic affinity. The most peaceful experiences I've had and have been in Bodh Gaya and Sarnath and Kusinara. But I couldn't, sitting in Bodh Gaya with sometimes the mind's peaceful, sometimes it isn't, and I realized that this cultivation of metta with the breath could be something very helpful that gets you through the difficult part. And then the noise might die down, and so big obnoxious noise, unruly crowd, or pain in the body, difficult mood. Oh, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be, as long as it takes. And then when that, whatever the challenge is, falls away, and it's very easy, may I be well, may all beings be well, may I be happy, may all beings be happy. And what starts as a skillful means to deal with a difficult moment can become a very broad, spacious, profound mind state. And then when we turn to the breath, it's easy, this quality of contentment and well-being that becomes quite resilient, and then it's easy to be with the breath sometimes for hours. So in my own personal experience of using metta to get through difficult patches, rough spots, to help bring more contentment into the mind, and then experiencing that helps the mind to be happy to be with the breath. I have a lot of first-hand experience of that, so I wanted to share that with you this evening, and I hope something I said was helpful.
อันธมยามโอวารกถาสาธุกรังกดัมมาเสสาธุสาธุสาธุอนุโมทามิ
I'd like to give the opportunity to ask any questions, make any comments, if anybody has any.
Anyone have questions? You can raise your hand.
Good evening, Tanajan. May I ask, for the lay person practicing Dana, Sila, and Bhavana, how does each practice reinforce each other? Yeah, thank you, Tanajan.
Yeah. Dana, Sila, Bhavana, how does it support or reinforce one another? So, the Dana practice, generosity, giving a portion of your income or some of your time, a skill, whatever it is, listening to someone who needs encouragement, advice, various ways to be generous, that creates good karma, that creates punya. And so if you have the analogy of like darkness and light, everybody's unenlightened beings' minds have a certain amount of darkness in them. And when we make good karma, it brightens to some degree. Apparently, I'm talking to monks who have a divine eye, most people's auras are kind of red, base chakra. And when they make merit, it lifts and the mind becomes orange. The quality, apparently merit itself has a color. The color of merit is orange. So for someone who can see these things, I'm just saying that there's different ways of understanding it. So for someone who has a visual mind who can see this thing, they know that person's just made merit because their mind brightened up. How you feel when you're making merit, that's like, sometimes you do it, if you're doing it because you feel like you should, but you're not really into it, you might not get that result. You still get some result, later probably. But if you have faith in the practice of dana, and you give with a heart of faith, and you feel glad about that, in that moment you have more well-being. And then you have more brightness, so that when you come to sit meditation, when there's more merit in the mind is more likely to feel peaceful, because the amount of darkness in a mind also affects the amount of peacefulness that you're likely to experience. So we brighten the mind up with merit. Similarly with the ethical precepts, Ajahn Achalo described it once as keeping the mind cool. So the kilesas, the seeds of kilesas are in our mind, and when we act on one of them, it's like a fire, burns the mind. The seed, the little flame becomes flames, and the mind burns with that kilesa. When you live within the parameters of the 5 precepts, the flames are flickering, but they're not burning the mind. And so it's cooler. And so when you have a mind that is brightened through making merit, and the mind that has a certain amount of coolness, then when you put forth effort into meditation, it's going to be easier. But if you kind of let go and totally indulge whatever the particular kilesa is, you want to have the passionate affair, you want to whatever, you want to critique that person, yell at them and tell them everything they did wrong, vent, come and sit after that, normally the mind won't become peaceful. You'll feel remorse. So it might feel good in the moment, and give them a piece of my mind, tell them what I really think, or let myself have that second piece of carrot cake and another espresso. But then when you come to sit, it's like, no, it literally translates as a duller mind with more remorse, more restlessness, more sleepiness. So when you keep ethical precepts, then the mind is more inclined to be peaceful. Now the benefit of a peaceful mind is more clarity. So that what happens is, like, next time you're generous, you notice in that moment that you feel happier. And then you notice when you break a precept, you'll notice straight away afterwards, it doesn't feel good. Whereas in the past, you might justify it. Just this once, a little bit of fun's okay. It's okay. That's an opinion. When you have more sensitized mind, you break the precept, and your own integrity, your radar for that, will know in the moment, no, that's not good. And then, so a lot of modern people is kind of reversed now. You know, a lot of people probably start with a meditation practice because they have suffering, and maybe they want some benefits from meditating, and they're a bit stingy and a bit kind of zigzaggy with the ethical precepts. But when it still works, because when you meditate, eventually you have to accept, no, it's better if I keep the precepts. My meditation is better when I keep the precepts. And then you realize, sometimes putting forth a certain amount of effort, not progressing, and there might be the realization, I haven't been very generous, maybe there's something to this. So, but it's the way Lord Buddha laid it down, dana, sila and bhavana. If we can do all of them at the same time, chances of progressing faster are higher. I remember when I'd done my first 10-day meditation retreat, and I'd heard the talk on sila, and I was like, modern Western people, the first interpretation of sexual misconduct, for example, would be like, if they want to do it and I want to do it, it's okay. That's not what the Buddha said. That's not what the Arahants say. That's not what wise people say. But it's what 21-year-old Brett Hansen thought. But then keep meditating and realizing, no, you do feel remorse about not keeping them strictly. And eventually, I was like, yeah, I guess the Buddha knew what he was talking about, As like a begrudging acknowledgement that it is better to keep the precepts, and the overall experience of well-being is superior if you do. I had one student who had drunk alcohol for decades, and I won't mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but at a certain point, he kept asking the same question, and he kept forgetting the answer, and I just got fed up with him, and I just said, look, because he was one of my first students, and in those days I had a lot of spare time, so I was willing to take on a difficult character, a hard case. But when I got more and more students, I didn't have that much time, and I just said, I'm not teaching you anymore, unless you stop drinking. Because my sense is the reason you keep forgetting is because you keep feeding delusion. So if you drink any more drinks from today, I'm not answering any of your questions ever again. He's like, really? I said, yeah, really? Like 10, 20, 30, 50 times is enough. He's like, but isn't it your job? I give you stuff and you answer my questions? Like, not more than 50 times, man. I was like, Sariputta apparently was willing to answer up to 500 times. He was, but I'm not at that level. And so he did give up drinking, and his wisdom did, his understanding of right view did develop. But he did have half a glass of wine after 6 months. The interesting thing about him is he noticed that he started to feel waves of just well-being that he couldn't identify a cause for. He'd just be walking around and he'd start to feel rapturously happy and content because he'd been keeping his precepts strictly and he'd been being generous towards the Sangha. Then he had half a glass of wine and he noticed a particular quality of dullness affected, that clarity and that feeling of well-being just went away, and it was about a month before it returned. So he, from the sensitivity of his own mind coming from his own meditation practice, he noticed that a half a glass of wine affected his ability, because we can always justify it. A half a glass is medicinal, a half a glass is relaxing. Yeah, but the Buddha said none. And the Buddha had the most wisdom, more wisdom than the modern doctors. And he had his own experience of lovely, resilient quality of rapture and joy and well-being just arising by itself when he kept the precepts perfectly. And when he was a bit sneaky with it, it's gone for a period of time. So yeah.
So pertaining to the topic of sexual misconduct, because you mentioned that it's not just both parties consent and it's okay. So what do we say if a lay person or a non-Buddhist lay person asks us what does sexual misconduct means in Buddhism? What's the right way to answer them?
What does sexual misconduct mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets tricky, doesn't it? So I remember one temporary monk was asking Ajahn Achalo in particular if visiting prostitutes was against the precepts, because if she didn't have a partner and he didn't have a partner, and she was willing to do it and, pay by the hour, it's a bargain, it's a contract. Is that, so a lot of Thai men might think that that's not against the precepts, if they're not in a relationship. And Ajahn Achalo says, well, the purpose of the precepts is to keep the mind cool and to keep the mind bright. And he looked at it from a completely different angle. He said probably the level of brightness in the mind of the prostitute is probably not that great. She'd probably turn to that career because of economic hardship. It's probably not the first thing she would choose to do. And then also she's coming in contact with the minds of several people a day. We don't know what quality their mind is, but they're coming to her with greed, obviously. They're using her for their pleasure. So what Ajahn was saying was, you're bringing your mind in contact with that mind, which is a bit dirty, and that's not going to, you can technically say it's not breaking a precept, but it's not going to help you. It's so he erred on the side of thinking that wasn't actually, allowed by the precepts. And I think one of the ways that I like to hear it described is being sexually responsible. So you're trying to use this energy with skill, carefully. That's then the nitty-gritty about what is allowed, what isn't allowed. I wouldn't go there, because it's it's more like if a person is truly interested in well-being and they want to be peaceful, that's the type of person to teach. But if a person wants to critique religions and say, these guys are all fault-finding, pious, holier than thou, that's probably not the one, whatever. Let them think what they think, but you might not be able to teach them. But I think the thing I would hold up is that our experience is that if you have one relationship where there is friendship, commitment to each other, and that is conducive to well-being and freedom from remorse. You don't have to go into what's bad. We just hold up what we understand to be helpful. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn, for the talk. In the talk yesterday, you mentioned that Ajahn and also mentioned that it might be a good strategy for us to hide out in the Deva realm as the world is going through deprivation. I know that if you keep your 5 precepts, you might be assured of a human birth, and if you enter into jhana, you might be assured of a Brahma rebirth. Which realm in the Deva is the most suitable? Is it the Tusita heaven?
Yeah, Tusita, yeah.
What can we do to be assured of a birth into Siddha heaven then?
So there's no guarantees, but you can increase the likelihood. So Ajahn Achalo told me that he feels the most suitable place to be born in a degenerating part of the eon. Because you say we can be born as a human if you keep the 5 precepts, but we also have to see how human is the human realm at any given time. If most of the humans aren't keeping the 5 precepts, I'm not sure it's a human realm anymore. You know what I'm saying? So that's the danger. It's like people have the human form. In Thai language, they will separate the word kon from manut. Kon is a being who has a human form, but a manut is someone who has the 5 precepts, manusa. And Ajahn Achalo talks about manusa devo, human beings with deva minds, and manusa delachano, human beings with minds of 4-legged creatures who have horizontal spines, delachano. It's not easy to be born into Shita, unfortunately, but for practitioners, so to be born into Shita, you need to experience Upajara Samadhi with some frequency. So Upajara Samadhi means touching on jhana, not quite jhana. But so in your experience, if you're meditating, if you're meditating for an hour, the first 15 minutes there's some thoughts, and then for 20 minutes there's peacefulness, coolness, spaciousness, only wholesome thoughts. If that's a frequent experience for you, that's likely that you can have a Tushita birth. But you have to set the aspiration at the end of your meditation, at the breakup of these khandhas, at the end of this birth, may I be spontaneously reborn in Tushita heaven. So you have to dedicate the merit of your meditation to it frequently. Plan B is Yamadeva. So you have the realm of the 4 kings, Chatu Maharaja, and then you have the Dawatingsa. Dawatingsa apparently is to be avoided. Too much fun, too much pleasure. So Dawatingsa is the place where you get the celestial mansion and 100 wives. I'm not sure if you can have 100 husbands. I don't know. I didn't make the rules. But it's more pleasure than this realm. The pleasures of heaven, the sensual heaven, is more pleasant than this one. So the danger is getting more attached to sensuality. And also the danger in Dawatingsa is using up one's merit. So fast, by consuming all of these pleasures. When your merit runs out, you have come down. So Yama is above that. Apparently Yama Devas like to spend time alone, like to chant. And they kind of more introverted devas. And the Dawatingsas are the partying devas. Apparently the Nagas party more than the Dawatingsa devas, thus have I heard. Serpents. But Ajahn Achalo said Yamadeva is also good. And so if you're someone who experiences frequent Kanika Samadhi, that means you experience 5 minutes of peacefulness frequently, and you experience some peace when you're chanting, then it's quite possible. So what I would recommend is that you aim for Tushita heaven, and what might happen is you aim higher and you don't quite make it, but you land in Yama. It's okay. It's a workable situation. That would be my recommendation. So Ajahn Achalo's recommendation as well. When you hear things in the suttas where Lord Buddha gives us hints about, he says for those who travel to the 4 holy sites with a mind of faith, that would not be difficult for them to be born in a heaven realm. He says that in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. So there are certain types of potent merits that increase your opportunity, your chances. And, probably a temporary bhikkhu ordination, if it's an option, will be also helpful. And hosting a katina, there's certain things that are potent merit. Yeah. But yes, keep your precepts strictly, meditate every day, chant every day, then during that time, actually, one way to understand it is during that time your mind is already a deva, you see. So the likelihood of you attaining a deva rebirth is how often have you been a deva during your human life? So again, last night I was giving advice about limiting screen time, turning the device off or not looking at it after 9, and allowing the mind to calm down a bit, and meditate first thing in the morning, put the phone on flight mode, just to kind of give the mind time to experience, spaciousness, serenity, tranquility, deva-like mind states, contentment. The reason one has to have Upajjhara Samadhi frequently to be born in Tushita heaven is because that's the experience of the Tushita Devas. It's as though they are in Upajjhara Samadhi all the time. And it's a mental pleasure that they're experiencing, and that's why it's called the heaven of the contented. That's what Tushita means, the heaven of the contented. So, sounds all right, doesn't it? It'd be nice to be contented for one lifetime after all this complaining. Apparently going to a Brahma realm is not recommended because the Brahmas can get intoxicated with their own radiance. It's like you have such a beautiful, bright, special, you think you're special. I look at my beautiful, bright mind. But if you go to Tushita, there's lots of other devas there who have more bharami and more merit than you. So it gives you a healthy context. For example, Maitreya's there. And you compare yourself to Maitreya, and okay, I'm not that special. But what a wonderful opportunity to pay respects to Maitreya before he comes down. So it is my plan A, by the way, to go to Tushita and hang out with Maitreya. So due to the merit of encouraging you people, may I be born in Tushita in the presence of Maitreya. Satu. So that's how you have to do it. After you make merit, you make a dedication. And Satu.
Thank you, Ajahn. So on Devas, so Mara, he's in the Nimmanarati Deva realm. So
even
what happened?
I think he's in Paranimitta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what happened there then?
Interesting question. This is part of why I love Buddhism. I love Buddhism because nobody is damned to hell forever. And as long as you're in the conditions, nobody is pure or free from danger. One thing that's very instructive about that question, how come Mara is in 2 heaven realms higher than Tushita? So when we look at the life story of Mahamoggallana, he was Mara just a few lifetimes before that. And this is a big hint as to what might have happened. So Mahamoggallana was renowned for being equal in power to the Buddha. Samadhi, psychic powers. So if someone's spending millions of lives working on power, and then they're presented with a choice, it's like, how about trying the power of Kilesa? We'll make you the CEO. Kilesa Incorporated. Your power can delude the mind, right? So it seems that Mahamoggallana's mind got intoxicated with power, and he chose that for one life. And that's the danger of samsara, If you still have delusion, ignorance and delusion, you can take a wrong turn. So how the story goes is Mara came and he was doing something unskillful towards Mahamoggallana, and Mahamoggallana said, I think he came into him. He says, I can see you, Mara, and I wouldn't do that if I was you. There was a life of mine, not so many lives ago, where I did this to such and such a bhikkhu, and then after that I went to Avijji hell for a long, long, long time. So we can see that foremost of the Buddha in power, just a few lives ago, was in hell. But so it's a bit dangerous if you're aspiring for foremost discipleship. There are dangers. And I almost suspect it might be something, I almost suspect that maybe all Buddhas are Mara at some point, a long time ago, before they get their prediction, because it's almost like they have to know samsara so well. They have to know all these delusions so well. I don't know, it's just amusing. And it's like, it would help you to know Mara. I know you, Mara. I used to be you. I know all your tricks. In terms of studying broadly, I'm not recommending it, because you do have to go to a VGL afterwards. Yeah. If there is ignorance in the mind, ignorance is not knowing ultimate truth. Because if a being doesn't know ultimate truth, they're susceptible to delusion. So that's what happened. He became temporarily deluded. And so that Mara, who's currently has that job, may be a future Mahamoggallana. It's good to keep in mind as well. So that's what I like that about Buddhism. No one's damned to hell for eternity. No one's in purgatory forever if they decide to improve themselves, change their karma. It's the whole thing's a recycling machine. You know, you can go from the top to the bottom, or the other way around. But not so easy to get up from down below, though. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ajahn, for the talk. So, for my practice, usually, sometimes I don't really know whether I'm, practicing correctly, and I would use the measure of like whether there is increase in dukkha or decrease in dukkha as a way to see whether I'm practicing in the right direction. But what Ajahn, you said is that, sometimes even an increase in dukkha may be the right direction. Then if that is the case, then I'm wondering if there is any test that I can use for myself to judge whether I'm practicing rightly. Yeah.
Peacefulness, clarity. As the way I would define growth is there truthful recognition of what's affecting your mind in the moment to moment? Is there more truth-discerning awareness? You know that a mind state's wholesome, you know that it's neutral, you know that it's unwholesome. There's a growth in clarity. That's development. I think there's an assumption that Buddha's practice should lead to happiness, and it's overall it does, but not necessarily in such a short, time frame. So you practice a lot today doesn't mean you'll be happy all day. There's other things that occur. I've had some very interesting experiences in meditation where for no reason at all a negative mind state ripens, or a certain amount of just pain is in the citta. And I've asked Ajahn and asked several Ajahns about this, and it can be the case that negative karmas that we created in our past lives ripen as painful feelings in the mind, having absolutely nothing to do with what you're doing today. And it's probably a good thing, because if some of those painful feelings are arising, saying for some time ceasing, karma is resolving itself, it's probably lessening the chances of becoming injured or sick or dying young, because some karma is lightening up. So we can't take how we feel in each sit as proof that it's working or not. We have to have more of a long-term, how is it overall? Overall, is there more well-being? Overall, is there more wisdom? Overall, is there less reactivity? Is there less attachment to your opinions? Are you less attached to being right? Are you less contentious with other people? These are things that I think are signs of growth. Just more wisdom. I used to argue with my parents about their politics, and after spending time in Thailand for 9 months and came back to Australia, and there was just the wisdom: don't argue with them. They're not gonna change. And then they kind of, there's just the mindfulness of that's what they believe. And then my mum, she said, "Oh, you've really changed. You seem so much more peaceful now." So benefit. My thoughts were the same, but I didn't make the speech of the karma of the speech and the contentiousness. Yeah. Freedom from remorse, more clarity, more presence of mind, more awareness of the nature of dukkha, more commitment to the path leading beyond dukkha. But I think the metta practice is really important. That's what supports us when suppose you're trying to sit and the mind just isn't becoming peaceful. Okay, do metta, Bring some, try to see thoughts as thoughts, try to be with the breath, try to let it go. If it doesn't work, 10, 15 minutes into it, okay, do metta. And after a period of years, you probably become quite skilled at cultivating metta, radiating metta. It's very helpful. It also increases merit. Relating to the other question, Lord Buddha once said, of all conditions, cultivating loving kindness is the condition that is most conducive to heavenly rebirth. I think there was a period where he practiced it for 7 years, I think it was. But that was at the level of a bodhisattva. It was probably metta jhana. I believe he was born as Sakadeva Raja Indra many lives afterwards as a result of that. So, yeah.
Any more questions?
So please commit to your daily practice. If you do already have a daily practice, take care of it, increase it a little bit if you can. If you're doing 1 session, try to add a second. Already committed to 2 sessions, try to add a third. It's good to have, you are Singaporeans. You know how to be disciplined. You know how to come up with a work plan. You can engineer a future of ever-increasing radiance. So, now I've been going to China on some recent trips, going to these Chinese holy mountains and beautiful renovated temples, sacred places. But there's, of all the temples I visited, I only saw one that had Dhamma books. And I never saw a single temple where a monk was teaching and people were allowed to listen. So people are expressing their faith, they're waving joss sticks, they're saying mantras, but you are the people with these Chinese-looking faces who have access to the teachings, opportunities to practice, and that's your good fortune. I hope you apply yourselves at practicing sincerely.
Sadhu, sadhu.
We were making some inquiries earlier, possibility of coming back and teaching a 9-day retreat in Singapore. Trying to find some, this gentleman's helping, trying to find a facility. That would be from a Friday night to a Sunday afternoon, 9-day period. It may happen, but it will depend on your merit. If you don't practice enough, I won't come back. Also depends if the facility is available, so. Sadhu.